the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome once again to the Brock v. Mac Legendary Rivals podcast. And, you know, one of my favorite people in the entire world, Rob Green, is joining us today.
Kind. You're too kind.
No, I'm not when it comes to you. You're just an incredible teammate and an inspirational person. And I think people are going to be really interested because, several people have asked about what you've been up to. And why don't we start there, Rob? What do what's life look like today for you other than really busy?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, Mike. And I'm going to throw this out there just before I forget. Thanks for being the true champion when it comes to Brock baseball, the 30-year reunion. If you weren't doing this and putting in all the blood, sweat, and tears, it wouldn't happen. I wanted to say that right off the bat. And it's been great listening to some of these podcasts, first and foremost, hearing what people are doing and what they're up to and, challenges people have overcome. So I'm loving that you're doing this, first and foremost. So a little bit about me. I live in Waterdown, Ontario now for, coming up on 20 years. Married a girl from Brock, and we've got two girls turning 16 and turning 12. I run multiple small businesses. I got the entrepreneurship bug coming out of Brock, and just sometimes I don't know which way is up, but life is good. I can't complain, and everybody's healthy in my life, and so I'm just looking forward to today, bud.
Having had, two girls that are now in university, mine are 20 and 19.
Seems crazy.
Yeah, like it's. Have you started, insulating the shed so you have somewhere to live? At a certain point.
I had moments for sure, but no, I'm very blessed. They're good girls, and I'm now dealing with boyfriends for the first time. So that's what I got with my oldest. So that's a whole new ball game, as you know, right?
Oh yeah.
Where I wish it was your size and not 5'11". That's for sure.
It is. And look, both of my daughters are in what I would call longer term boyfriend type relationships they're great. They have great partners, but my oldest in particular, and she'll punch me and separate my shoulder because she's 6 feet tall and strong as an ox. She'll separate my shoulder by punching me for telling this, but I can remember she had not such a great boyfriend at a certain point. And I pulled up and said, Jordan, she asked me to pick her up at his place. And I said, Jordan, get in the car. And as soon as the door shut, I turned to this young man and I said, young man, I have lots of standards for my daughter and you meet none of them. And I expect not to see you ever again. That was just kind of my polite way, but probably very direct way of governing that. But, the great thing is they generally, other than maybe a little adventure here or there, which we've all had in life, they settle into some really great choices, and their boyfriends bring a lot to into life. So I quite enjoy both my daughters' boyfriends, and I feel bad for them. They have to, put up with my daughter's needling all the time. So it's kind of like being on a team with Kemp Tyler and Gendron on it, where you just can't say the wrong thing because you're going to get obliterated afterwards, right? So it's
Absolutely. Don't come over if you live in a glass house, right? So
well, this is great. So you can always, and we'll talk about you getting in a bat at Brock, but you can always pull out the bat and just say, I'm still
absolutely, it's
pretty good with this.
Well, I like to think that I've raised two pretty strong-headed, willed children that I, that's probably the best thing you can do is just make them independent. And as you said, with it's a great story. First of all, there's a whole bunch of girl dads out there that are going, good for you doing that, because we'd all do the same thing that you did. But it's it's great to watch them grow, and love watching them from whether it's their activities or sports that they do, to see them growing. It's fun. It's fun.
Well, speaking of sports, and that's, we'll kind of start at the beginning here. Tell me about, growing up and how you developed a love for sports, and then maybe transition that into baseball. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, sure. Burlington boy, born and raised. Probably got the love of sports from both my parents. My mom wasn't like a sporty person, but surrounded by family. She's got a huge family in Kingston. I had cousins that played in the NHL, so they're very sports-oriented family side. And my dad and my dad's brother were really involved in sports. Like one time, my dad and my dad's brother were two of the best amateur golfers in the Maritimes as teenagers. And so got the love from there. But I think my mom loves to tell a story that I didn't want to do anything when I was little, 5, 6, really didn't want to do anything. So didn't want to sign up for anything. And then I got pushed into T-ball. Probably, I think they wanted me to do something. I think it was 7, and fell in love with baseball from there. And I played all the way through high school, played 3 sports, probably like a lot of our teammates, and enjoyed all of them. But baseball was always my first true love and passion.
And what high school did you go to that they had high school baseball in Burlington? And were there any future Badgers in the mix, or any future teammates when you played for Burlington and other rep teams?
So Nelson High School is where I went, and we had great ball all the way through. I remember in grade 9, the guy who coached us said, unless you're Bo Jackson Jr., you're not going to make this team. And there was a couple of us that looked at each other like, all right, challenge accepted. And then I was finishing playing high school basketball, and I came down on someone's foot driving the lane and rolled my ankle, and I couldn't try out. But my buddy did. My buddy made the team. He didn't play much because that team was stacked. But I started playing in grade 10. And I think at one time, I don't know if it was grade probably 12, our team was just full of rep kids. And there was another high school in Burlington that had a great ball program, M.M. Robinson. And at one time, I think we were ranked 1-2 in the province. And we used to get, some of those, like Toronto Star would come out and see when we played each other for the city championship. We'd have a lot of people like watching the game, which was fun. But from a teammate standpoint, so there was Kapusa. So when I would have been in grade 13, he would have been in grade 11. And then Joel would have been grade 10 when I was in grade 13. So, so to have those boys show up at camp was pretty funny. So, well, I guess Nate was at doors at a time, but I know Joel would have been showing up at the next year at summer camp.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's where we get our roots is really important. Tell me a little bit about your transition into Burlington rep ball, and did you have any coaches and I assume you were playing a position as well as pitching at the time. How did you settle on your positions that you played?
Sure. So probably, I think when I was 8, I played rep T-ball, which sounds quite funny, and it's sick back there. But now you look at rep sports, it's a whole different game now, right, as you know. And then anyways, probably got real serious with ball when I was about 12, I guess, and then played all the way through. I was very fortunate. Had great teammates, and our Burlington team, we won OBAs, I think 4 years in a row as we moved up age brackets. And it was just I just had a group of kids that we could be down 2-1, and we just knew we'd come back and win. We just had that attitude. I was very blessed. I played with the best group of kids all the way through. I think there was, out of, say, call it 11 of us that consistently, 11 or 12 of us that consistently played together, call it 12. There was 9 kids that went to the States, and that's, of course, going back, that was a day that, you just couldn't go walk into a big school. Like, a lot of kids had to go smaller school, JUCO route, to hopefully get a D1 ride out of there. But from coaches, we had a couple of dads that coached us all the way through. Guy Paul Lysak, Danny, his son, went to Duquesne to play ball. And then we had guy Ron Smicko Sr., who was great. Ron Sr. is the best. I'm best buddies with his kid to this day. And he was a good yeller. And so I know some mom might not have liked it, but I don't know. It was just, I reacted well to it. And it wasn't that, he wanted to make you better because he saw the potential in you. And then at the same time, when you delivered, those were the coaches I always respected, would kind of give you that pat on the back on, like, that's what I was talking about, right? That's what I was trying to get at you. So he was really influential as well. So it was the same coaches. I had another gentleman, Bruce Evans, his son Jamie, who unfortunately has passed away since, was probably one of the better pitchers to come out of Burlington, period, and for probably a good decade. But he helped us a lot too when I was like 17 and 18, and that's when I got hurt when I was 18. So position wise, probably like everybody, they play around. Like I remember I used to play, would play short, but once we got more into rep, and especially when we pitched, we didn't usually hit, and then the times I hit, I wasn't very good. So probably I transitioned mainly to pitcher, probably for sure, high school ball for sure. So right around 14, there's a few of us, that's all we really did was we did pitch.
Yeah, I think most of us really love the fact that there was the DH rule. Truthfully, it's because I live for the confrontation of being a pitcher, but given my love of throwing inside and hitting the odd person with the ball,
yeah,
I might as well have gone up there in a big uniform that looked like a target. So I'm
absolutely
happy. I'm happy I didn't get, look, there are some players, Steve Fatour, that we'll talk about later, that thrived on both playing a position and throwing some innings. But I think there's a different mindset, and especially when you're a starting pitcher, you kind of build up. You have this day where you're there to perform, and then you kind of loosen up after that. Did you always love the moment, having the responsibility of setting the tone for the team as a pitcher?
Loved having the ball. That's what I love about baseball, is that you know what you're going to do before the play happens, right? Like if there's a ground ball hit back to me and the base is loaded, I'm going home and going to try to turn 2. Or if there's a guy in first, I'm going to try to start the double play if it comes back to me, or I'm looking for a ground ball. So no, I loved it. I love the strategic aspect of it. I wasn't that guy. I was never that guy that could just sit back and throw it by people, right? Especially as we got older. I had to be, a location kid. I had to be a mix it up, right? From a pitching standpoint, I tried to utilize 3 or 4 pitches all the time. And, and I knew it was on that I could also dictate it, that if there's a batter looking for a certain pitch, that I wasn't going to necessarily throw it, right? So, you go back to Greg Maddox's of the world, right? I could sit there and just watch Greg Maddox all day, and just like how he orchestrated a game and how he was the conductor. So I love that about pitching.
It's amazing. We all have our people that we would emulate. You remind me of Maddox a lot, 9,000 ways. I was more of an Al Leiter, kind of guy. I liked the way that, my mechanics were nowhere near as precise as his, but very similar, I think, in just philosophy and where the pitches would end up and a few of those kinds of things. So
that was the part about, like, when I remember facing like crazy lefties like you. They're not even looking at the plate, and they do this big windup and it scares the shit out of you because you don't know which way the ball is going to fly in on you. But you're right. When you've got that, Mike, and especially when you're taller and you're throwing downhill, right? That's you can totally use that to your advantage. So my career didn't end up like Maddox's, unfortunately, but it's okay. I appreciate it. It's a very small, like, Maddox, Rob. So we're more comparing apples and truck tires at that point. But I appreciate that reference.
So tell me, just a different question than we've asked other folks. I can see you being involved in a few things. What was your high school experience like? Were you do you recall what it was like, just in terms of your participation in extracurricular, or a little bit of how you were, did you enjoy high school, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I did. It's funny. We just literally had this conversation with my oldest last night, which is funny. She's a grade 10. And one of the things that we told her when she went to high school was just get involved. Get involved, whether it's like going to like school dances to football games to whatever. And I just loved being involved. I was never that kid too that wanted the center of attention. I was not me at all, but I love to be involved, right? You need an extra hand for student council. Sure, I'll do it. So I was on student council for a couple of years. I know our hockey team was one of the best in the province. So, a few of us would always try to be ringleaders and get the crowd going at hockey games. And I didn't mind doing that at all, right? Because wasn't for me, it was for everybody. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, I know I loved being involved. And, I was fortunate. I was picked to be captain of a number of teams I played on in high school. And I think that's just more because, hey, I worked hard. I wasn't necessarily the best kid on the team. But I was always willing to put in that extra effort and try to raise everybody else around me too. I think that's what I always love to do. Yeah.
Somehow that is not a shocking answer, Rob. So what went into the choice of Brock? What do you remember the universities that you applied to and what you got into?
Well, so in Canada, I applied to Queen's, Laurier, and Brock. But I was looking to follow a couple buddies that were going to school in Michigan to play ball. And I ended up getting hurt, funny enough, in high school baseball. And so I ended up tearing my rotator cuff a bit, but it didn't get properly diagnosed. So I just remember trying to like play catch for the longest time, and it just hurt. So I just kept resting. So I didn't. So I thought, you know what, maybe I'll go to school in Canada for a year or so, and then maybe look at changing. And then so I got accepted to all three schools, and I just, I took a tour of all three, and Brock was my last choice, but it ended up being my first choice, and I'm so grateful that I went to Brock. I tell everybody that it was my best experience, and so it kind of it literally was like my last choice. You, Mike, ended up being the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I think to see the campus and to actually spend an hour there will change everyone's perspective, because it has a warmth, and I've said this on several other podcasts. You see your classmates a lot. You see the people from res. It's not a commuter school like a York where everyone hops in their car afterwards and drives home. Yeah. There's a life there. It's its own world, and I love that too. It's a markedly different experience than some of the other schools I had friends go to, or definitely.
I agree with that. Totally agree with that.
So what do you remember? What courses you initially started off with, and what your early days of Brock before there was baseball, what that entailed? I think you were involved a little bit with intramurals, right, and a few other things.
So I took business at Brock. Ended up by my third year, I ended up kind of looking to major kind of in entrepreneurship and marketing is kind of the path I went down and for my BBA. first year I lived in the village, and had good roommates, but even had better neighbors. There were great guys. Dave Picton was a ball player at the time on the basketball team, and him and I just hit it off, and we were always goofing off, just playing anything from Risk at night to like tobogganing to like always doing something. I just, you know, and it was I think we got involved. They had intramural teams because him and his roommates were a couple of years older. And so they were like, hey, come play on our slow pitch team or come play on our flag football team. So I just started getting involved. And then I remember that you could ref and make some extra cash. Well, I went to school with not a pot to piss in. So I was like, you know, I can make $8, like, you know, refereeing this slow pitch game or something like that. So I was like, that's a no-brainer. So liked it so much that the second year they were looking for people on intramural, on the intramural program to help run the intramurals. And they paid you a little per diem, but more so I was just getting involved. And so I did. I got involved on the campus rec program. There would probably be 25 or 30 kids that helped run all the difference, and they would sign it to different ones. So with my baseball background, they gave me slow pitch. So I actually helped run the slow pitch league for that year, my second year. And then fast forward, I joke with people, like a couple of my buddies like to make fun of me for that. They're like, oh yeah, it took Rob 5 years to get his degree. I'm like, I enjoyed my 4 years so much, I did 5. So I spread, right? Especially the year we played ball.
Yeah, of course.
A couple less courses that fall. I stayed involved running their intramural program while we were playing ball. And obviously just, you know, now you're getting later on, you want to make sure you get your degree. So, so I did that over 5 years, and then it was a blast. In fact, you know, my university roommates, my last 2 years of school, they're my best buddies still today. They're my brothers, and we all ran the intramural program together, and it was great. And so we actually helped run. Brock hosted all the different universities' campus rec programs, and we had a couple hundred people come to Brock. And that would have been, I guess that was the year we played ball. So that came that winter, and that was awesome. And probably, you know, we'll talk a bit about it, it's probably one of the most influential people in my life was our intramural head. I can't remember her title. This is terrible. Her name is Karen McMaster Kinney.
Mm-hmm.
I joke between Karen and her husband, Joe. Joe was a head physiotherapist. When we played ball, I spent all my time, if I wasn't in school or running the intramural program or practicing ball, I was in Joe's physio clinic, and he was working on my arm. And so between them, Karen was probably one of the most influential people because, again, coming back to if I give advice to young people is get involved, because you never know who's going to mentor you and have the biggest influence in your life, and you don't even know it. So she allowed us to have this leadership position, and I think this is what's helped me, you know, progress even into today, was around the fact that she gave us so much leeway running the program. So if there was a conflict, you know, one year we had a brawl in like a intramural soccer game. Got a phone call from a kid who was refereeing. He called us at her home and said, "There's a big fight going on." I'm like, "Where?" In the gym, which was nuts. So we had to get involved. We had to get involved from a disciplinary standpoint, and she guided us. She didn't tell us what to do. She guided us, and it was great. It was like she was almost like a coach. In fact, funny enough, she played university volleyball, so she's got her sports experience as well. But she gave us that like kind of a flexibility and autonomy at a young age that we didn't even realize at the time how influential that would be all of us. In fact, all my buddies today are now very successful leaders in their fields in all of us are in 4 different areas, but all big leaders and the big responsibilities for what we do. We all credit it back to what that intramural experience taught us, which is pretty cool.
It's super great to hear. And an underrated part of the university experience is getting involved in, aspects of student life, whether it's through the student union or, the current president of the current paid president of the Brock Student Union is a guy named Rob Hilson, who was key in the McMaster. He was the athletic director at McMaster at a certain point. Very supportive of baseball, for example, but, always getting people involved in, young students and involved in things like Brock TV, which they have now, which is a TV station that they run on campus as opposed to a newspaper, and a few things like that. I think it's, these are parts that, you openly encourage your kids and others to get involved with, because it really is much more of a training ground than, say, some of the theoretical classes we all took, that, we've never revisited. I did take some, I took the same program you did, Biz Admin, and, there were some practical courses, marketing. I still use a lot of that stuff, but, things like micro and macroeconomics, I might quote once in a lifetime.
Sure.
And you just have to, you just grind through those courses where it's kind of like, and so, you have this great, you have a really robust experience. And did you, move from the village did you have a place in St. Catharines?
Yeah, I lived in the village just the first year. Second year, lived downtown on, right across from the beer store, right downtown. It was kind of a shitty area of town. And it was we always know it when it was kind of like the welfare checks came in, because there'd be a lineup at the beer store right across the street in the Friday morning. It was eerie and sad at the same time. And so I lived downtown one year, lived in Thorold my third year, had to take that little Thorold bus to campus every day. And then fourth and fifth year, I lived right at the bottom of Glengarry Hill, right by there was a Canadian Tire, not far from the Penn Center. So I lived right down there my last 2 years of school there.
Yeah, no, it's, I think another area where you really got to pay attention when you're at school is picking the right place to live. And
yeah,
I was blessed. I mean, somehow we ended up, even though it was kind of infamous for having keg parties and stuff, we ended up right at the bottom of the hill, right on the corner of, right at the bottom of the hill when you come down from the campus there. And it really was kind of like the student ghetto.
Yep. Great area.
Yeah, so that was fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun. I'll at some point talk about, you would do stupid stuff in university, like have a keg party, and then you would have beer left over. And instead of getting rid of the beer, you would then drink it, but it would have a stale date. So as it would get close to the stale date, I can vividly remember having beer on Frosted Flakes as a dietary choice.
At least you didn't have a problem.
No, not at all. High in fiber,
Hey.
So,
well, you got to think about it. Back in the day, when you get a whole bunch of people together and get a keg for $80, and you wanted to finish it, because then you want to take the keg back to get some refund cash, course, right? You just got to be resourceful.
That's right. Yeah.
And two, I'm really glad we didn't have iPhones back in those days, right? Like, right? All this stuff, and you got to go to school, so yeah. Right.
So before we get into it, I think something fun we're going to crack out on this, and you'll be the first one to do this. Let's rank there's about 5 bars, and maybe you're going to add one to the mix, but let's rank the campus or the student body hangouts. So we have Isaac's, the student pub.
Yeah.
We have Smart Alex, which is up across the road and across the street.
Yeah. And was it there? Like it got shut down soon after we left too. There's a whole bunch of people who'd be like, what's Smart Alex? Smart Alex was great. My first year, Smart Alex was a spot to go. What was the one down on Merrittville Highway?
Well, the 4 that I remember just being in rotation were Isaac's, Smart Alex, Gord's and Shooters downtown, and Front 54 in Thorold.
Yeah.
And then occasionally we would, especially after we got over the age of 21, we would hop into a car and go across the states. And there was a place it was either Niagara Falls or Buffalo. My memory's a bit hazy on that, called The Late Show, where you would pay a $10 American cover charge and you could drink all night. It was like a big keg party in an old theater. So great. Smart Alex was always my favorite place while I was at Brock, because it was the reverse of, it was light and the dance floor was sunk and the bar was around the dance floor. And it was fairly easy to pick out, some that you might have your eye on, or just, they played great music. I used to remember they used to finish it off with, Home for Rest by Spirit of the West, or a polka.
Like holding their drinks and dancing on the floor. And that's back in the day too. I remember people could smoke cigarettes, and you just I'd be looking around going, if somebody hits me with a cigarette, I'm going to be so pissed, right? Because people are around, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. The other one I'll throw in there was, it's called the London Arms, which was down in the Penn Center.
Mm-hmm.
And there was two guys that in my genre that used to entertain us playing guitar and singing, were Moose and Carl. And so I don't know if you ever recognize those names. They were both in the rec and leisure program, which is actually funny, where my wife was. And so they just played one night at the London Arms. And I think the first night, my roommates and I went, and a few of my good buddies, a couple of good buddies from the Schwa, that there was like 9 of us in there. And then we just kept encouraging people to come. And before you know it, like, they had a lineup. They had to get like someone to manage the door because it'd be packed and people would show up after class. And that was our Thursday night hangout for sure. My last year of school, we had a blast.
London Arms. It's again 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. That is where we interviewed Coach McRae. And yeah, and I think I said this during the Larry Houston one, or maybe the Ted one. Coach McRae, as we're interviewing him at some point, had to go to the washroom, and Ted Gendron, who was a psychology major and real good read on people. As soon as Mike gets up to go to the washroom, he turns to me and says, "This is the guy." And he was right, as he usually was. And so it sounds like you're like I frequently admit this. I was having a wonderful experience at Brock. Baseball was not, at that point, you're kind of into your classes, the experience. I was living year round in St. Catharines at that point, moving in, working in the summer as well. And then at some point, a baseball, the infamous posters and banners go up. When did you first get wind that there was a baseball club forming? Is it something, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember the posters for sure, because people always thought I was a phys ed major, because I just would go to the phys ed complex, right? All my buddies were in phys ed or rec or health studies, and they were always there, and I was involved in the intramural program. But I used to, so I'd always see the sign-ups. I remember that, thinking that there's a baseball club, and I'm thinking, so I knew that I'd heard rumblings that there was, I knew some schools had a ball team, right? Like, oh gosh, I just forgot a couple of the names. Durham College had a team and a couple others. So I remember seeing that. I definitely remember a table signing up. Was that you and Ted signing people up? Was it really? Brilliant. Yeah. So I definitely remember that. And so that would have been, what year was that?
That was 1990, spring of 1995.
Spring of 95? Wow.
Yeah. Or winter, actually. We started way back when, coming into the second term of 95. So that would have been January. And I think we did the signups in February and eventually got to winter workouts and stuff. But it was...
we started right after that, right? It wasn't long. Yeah. How many kids ended up signing up for that?
Over 100, I think it was either 135 or 165. I had everyone's player resume on we had these forms filled out where you had to fill out your background and all that kind of stuff, and how to get a hold of you. And, so I had this big blue binder that had everyone's player application in it. I guess so Ted and I would sit there after we had all these signups, and we would kind of be like, wow, how do you get to 22 or 23 out of this, right? Immense amount of people. It was way more interesting than we thought. We thought we would get maybe, 15 to 20 and probably a handful of ball players out of that. And then we'd have to spend the entire summer just trying to find and dig up people that we could get to come to Brock to fill out the roster. But Um, you know,
Well, I
it
remember
was,
that winter workout. I remember going to the gym and seeing a whole bunch of people. And well, who was McRae at the first couple of workouts, Mike?
no, he came about halfway through.
Okay. And I remember just being like lined up on either side of the gym and people throwing balls back and forth, and nobody could throw a ball straight around me. And I was like, I remember teaching some kid, listen, it's called step and throw, right? Step and throw. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I signing up for right now? I literally thought that. I'm like, Jesus, like, is this like, how many people have actually played ball here before? I was a little worried at first, right? And then it quickly got, narrow funneled down a little bit. So I don't know if you've talked about this on previous podcasts or not, but what was your process to cut that 120 down to even like 50 or 60?
Well, and I can kind of pull back the curtain now after 30 years. Ted and I were never involved in making choices on who was on the team or not. We did chip in with things like we would get asked on occasion, initially by Briggs Jude, and there were two other coaches, Rob Cardis from Welland and Bob Sharp, who's an umpire from St. Catharines. And Mark LePage was kind of part of that mix as a student helper / who's going to be a coach. And we would just initially kind of just give our quick 2 cents on if there was people that stood out that they shouldn't be there. Like, please take a look at the, because they're going to put holes in the wall, or, they just can't hit someone from 10 feet away or whatever. But they would take care of that. And then when Coach McRae came on board, he absolutely took over all aspects of player evaluation, and he ran a recruiting program. Again, Ted and I would chip in and help scout tournaments, and particularly start to introduce players that weren't at Brock and funnel them towards the coaching staff. Mostly Coach McRae, and but what we did have to do was coordinate the gym time with Bob Davis, and try to coordinate, how to run, make the facility functional for that number of people. And I think the earliest that I would have met you is when the pitchers and the catchers got isolated and we got moved upstairs.
Yep.
And
I remember that.
Yeah. And Coach Topping
was up in the upstairs. I totally remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Coach Topping was introduced to us by Coach McRae, and he came to indoor workouts. So he would bring those plates, those ones that you could put down on the ground there. And, the one thing I will say about the pitching group was there were some, especially in these indoor workouts, out of that came 7 of the 10 pitchers that ended up pitching in the team. And so you had some vets and some real, accomplished people there. But there was a huge gap between the people who could and then the people who couldn't. So, unfortunately, the people who couldn't turned the ballet studio into Swiss cheese by missing the catcher. And yeah, that didn't go over real well with the administration at the time. But what I remember, is then shortly thereafter they cut those. They cut as many of the, the very marginal or the pitchers who were down a level from those initial 7 to 10, I think. But our part of the practice, those indoor workouts, then quickly turned into conditioning. You remember how many we had to run stairs, and we had to do the towel drill, and they started to immediately crack us into shape.
You're breaking up a bit there. Sorry, buddy. I was going to say, I totally remember that. Like, all of a sudden it went from kind of loose to like real tight, right? Remember kind of the drills we used to run and stuff like that, and like the workouts, and I totally remember that. And I remember honestly going into those at first thinking, I haven't pitched live ball in 4 years, right? Because I hadn't played any summer ball since I got hurt, And so I remember what I loved about that more than anything, it got me back into like pitching shape. I was always active. I worked out, I lifted weights, but I never, right? I didn't throw a ball ever, right? So I actually didn't mind those winter workouts. I look forward to it because that was like a real spring training to me to see, am I going to be able to do this or not? Right? So no, I didn't mind it.
Yeah, it also created a leadership core, real early because Chris Ebel, you, myself, Teddy, Alex, and Brad were all there, and
Funny, eh?
got an understanding what the expectation was, especially and Todd. I'd be remiss if I didn't name Todd in that mix, but he was a catcher at first.
Yeah.
And but we bonded really strongly because we were running. So everyone else was listening, and I think we were all running stairs. I remember how many times we'd run up and down those stairs, and you have conversations and get to know each other because what else are you going to be doing when you're running up and down stairs, really? And
Totally.
I think we all got very tight out of that situation.
I actually,
do you remember your first meeting with Coach McCrae?
I do. It was at that one of those workouts, and I think it was one of the ones like they wanted us to wear, if we could, jerseys with our names on it, right? So they're trying to figure out who people are, and I ended up, the only jersey I had with my name on it was when I played on Team Ontario when we won the elimination tournament in Burlington and went to nationals. So I wore there I am wearing this blue Ontario, jersey, green on the back. And I remember just kind of looking around and watching somebody do a drill. And all of a sudden I felt somebody right here. And I could turn around and there's McCrae. He's right there. And he's like, when did you play Ontario ball? And I'm like, so I'm Rob. And I totally remember that. That was my first encounter with him and then learning about his past. And I talked about who some of my coaches were back in the day. And he knew those guys from just being involved with ball, of course, in Ontario, and yeah. So no, I totally remember that.
Well, the hard part is Coach McCrae looked so young and still looks. He doesn't age. I don't know what the hell is what he drinks in his water.
God bless him. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find it hard to given how young he looked, it's hard to have maybe, a person that is kind of a peer, probably in age at that point, as an authority figure, and it wasn't hard to have Mike as an authority figure, don't get me wrong, but first impressions are always important, especially with baseball players and especially pitchers who've had some tenure and career. Mm-hmm. Do you remember thinking, boy, he's a young looking guy?
I remember thinking that, so many of the guys that were involved with the program were young, which I really liked. I thought you could relate to them better, to be honest. And knowing Mike's background, knowing his experience, knowing the level of ball he had played, I was totally open to it. If it's somebody who had never pitched, right, and you might have thought the same, and probably some other guys, if someone didn't know how to throw a curveball, I probably would have struggled taking kind of advice from them more so. But Mike was the opposite, right? Such a mind for the game, so knowledgeable, played high level ball, been involved from a coaching high level ball standpoint. I found it real easy to gravitate to him.
Do you remember your first interactions with Coach Briggs Jude, and what your thoughts were of Wayne?
I thought he was a great man. I don't remember my first interactions with him more so as much as I think he was he the guy who drove us around? I've always remember being in Huge's truck when we went to games and chatting with him. Well, I know we'll probably talk about Nationals a little bit. I totally remember a time with Briggs Jude in Montreal. But I don't remember the first encounter with them. I think probably where I really remember, getting to know guys like Kemp and Coach Lounsbury and LePage is when we went to did summer camp. I think leading into the season probably more so, and different times at that point. Not as much in the winter because I know we were kind of being pitcher guys isolated from a pitching standpoint a little bit, but that's kind of how I really remember them.
So, what were your first impressions coming out of the? We survived the cut downs on the coming out of the winter workouts, and how did you prep for the first season? And most importantly, I think anyone that knows you knows that you're battling your shoulder at this point all the way through, and just trying to get to a point of feeling comfortable, which is super important for pitchers. You can be 100% physically, but still not comfortable, and it affects your performance on a mound.
Yeah.
Where are you physically at this point, and how did you prep for the summer training camp?
Yeah, sorry, we're having a little internet problems here a bit, buddy. Sorry about that. I broke up there a bit. But I was going to say how I got, I was concerned. Well, first of all, I had no idea how much ball we were going to end up playing. When you think about, I had no idea that we were going to play, basically it felt like 60 games in 60 days. But I knew that if I'd pitched all summer and then going into the fall, I don't think I would have had the stamina my shoulder would have held up. So I played a lot of catch and long toss, and then jumped on this, almost got involved in game experience kind of later in the summer with a couple of local teams. Nothing super competitive, but just to have somebody in the batter's box. Yeah, because I think that's always been my mindset, right? I just want to. I always feel I got to get myself ready. I got to be ready for the event. I'm big on the phrase 51% accountable. So if I want the results, I got to put in the effort. And so I did that. My brother was a catcher, so that I was fortunate from that standpoint. So we could just go kind of every 4 days to just to our Nelson High School stomping grounds just go if the field wasn't getting used. He would just go put on the gear, and I just go practice off speeds more than anything, because throw a competitive curveball is different than throwing when nobody's there. So yeah, that's how I got ready. That really led up to it. So I felt like I was in pretty good shape. I remember that going into the August workouts or the August camps, because I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if coming out of that where I would rank, if I'd make the team or not. So so I remember going, that's how I wanted to be ready for it.
Yeah. And so can you tell us a little bit what your thought process was, knowing that we had cut down to about 30, and then we show up at a training camp, and all of a sudden there are a big infusion of talent, again, new players that have been recruited, and not so much from a pitching standpoint. We were I think only about 15 of us at camp, 15 to 17 as I recall. There wasn't a lot there, but we now are looking at an outfield of a totally new outfield, 4 of them: Juziak, Bottomley, Daryl Houston, and Andy Tinish. And, some real standout players as well, like Jeff Hoover at third and that kind of stuff. What was your feeling when you arrived at camp the first day?
I remember looking around. It's so funny you say it. That was my memory too, is looking around, you see guys. Well, it's you see the Houston brothers show up, and I think that's where Tinish showed up for the first time. And then, as you said, Hoover, and it was impressive. I'm I played with some kids who were some pretty good ball players and played against some pretty good talent, and to see that amount of talent, also, I was quite impressed right off the bat of the amount of ball players. And I remember watching cut drills, and you can see these kids know how to run a cut drill, right? With balls hitting the gap, and that was fun to watch. And I actually got my juices flowing for the first time from intramurals don't count, right? It's fun. You want to win, but it's not the same to get those competitive juices watching this could be a fun team to play for. It really got me going. Yeah.
It's there were some infamous moments in that training camp, but there was also a big contingent of Burlington oriented players. Brian Simmons had been at the winter workouts, but now we have Mark Kasoyan, we have Joel, we have Matt Fletcher. Yeah, Kapusa, who, unfortunately got hurt in that Birdman of Meriton nonsense.
And that's a
But
stupid ass story I remember from camp too. I remember that happening. That I'm sure we could talk about that. But yeah, there was a good little. I remember that in the winter workouts because Simmons played ball with my brother because he was a couple of years behind me, and so did Kapusa. And Kapusa and I went to high school. We had already played high school ball together, so yeah, so felt comfortable, and just and I think it helped too that I was a little bit older than like you. We were kind of senior people. We had a little more experience at the school. I'd already been involved, as I mentioned, with intramurals by this point for a couple of years, so felt comfortable just kind of walking up, trying to make people feel comfortable, and it was nice to see some Burlington kids. It was, a guy like Joel was good hard thrower back in the day, right? So it was fun. Yeah, it was fun to see a bunch of those people I knew. But more so, absolutely, I was excited, and it was same as you had a good contingent from the Schwa, so you could tell that, that what I liked that you could just see the synergies. It wasn't cliquey; it was just synergies that that people knew each other and people were comfortable. Because at that time at the camps, you're kind of looking around. You want to see how you rank, and you want to see like what are these people like? Like I'm in my fourth year, and I'm thinking, is this something that I want to really be part of? And I'm going to have a busy year. We had, as I said, we're running that provincial conference that I was helping run for intramurals. So it was one of those, like, that was probably the only thing I wrestled with was like, do I have the time to do this? And, but it didn't take long for me to realize, and I was driving back and forth at that time. Actually, maybe I think I stayed at our spot because we had the same house at that point. I moved in early at that point because I was our fourth year. We moved into that house. So I was able to get in before school started so I could be there for camps. But I remember that, explicitly that like this is a fun group of guys and not only that, but also this new talent that like can play. So which was fun.
Yeah, I think we benefited actually from having someone like you were had been at Brock, and obviously we're sometimes people become leaders on teams for different reasons, right? In your case, we had a lot of young Burlington players, and Nate, who I think probably unfortunately was injured because of the duck walk and the stuff with the Birdman. So it he had to rehabilitate and was around the team, but I'm sure Nate would have loved to have played more. We need an active player that was tied to the Burlington guys to be able to build that bridge. And I took that responsibility on my shoulders for the Oshawa guys, who are all young, other than Ted. And, we spent a lot of time building a bridge between those two groups because it's, over half the team between those two groups of people. And then, as we get into camp, I think things start to separate more naturally by position, where the pitchers are all very tight because we're, doing the same drills or together a lot more. And the position players are naturally pulled out of that mix. And it was, Joel Garten brought this up on his podcast. It was so different than, rep ball, where he was right. You would run a few foul pulls, you'd throw a quick bullpen session, and the rest of the time you're out shagging flies a lot of times. And that was never the case at Brock. We were always, I can remember we would do extensive stretching as pitchers, and it would look a little bit like a Tai Chi class usually in left field around the bullpen, because Tim and Mike had us doing this scenario where you would we all looked like the Karate Kid. We'd be on one leg, our arms would be out in full arc, and we'd be trying to balance. And I would always just think to myself, don't go out the night before, because if you're hungover and you try to do that balance drill where you're on one leg, and you'd never survive.
I laugh. Everybody, I'm like, so you wish you could have those genes now where you can eat and drink whatever you want. You never gain a pound, right? But But I remember those workouts were great because I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the best shape I've ever been in. And I'll say this, I know you and I had talked about the towel drill and stuff we done. That towel drill, there was times I'm like, man, I wish I had this drill when I was 15, because when I lost my curveball for a little while, and I found it, during the season. And then there was times it never snapped better ever in my life. Then, so doing those drills, I don't think if we had done that lead up for a lot of those drills, I don't think maybe all of our guys would have had that success. And you take, people that, that other hadn't pitched a lot of competitive ball or really did much pitching at all. So now they're learning kind of real, kind of top level drills. You're right. Like I never did that growing up. We would play long toss. We'd do the same. We have a bully session, and then we'd shag fly balls or practice punting or, infield drills, but nothing that would build that type of core strength, leg strength, right? That's critical, right? That I wish I would have had. Because that's funny, because you look back on it, I can say it's there's three of us that played high school ball. We played this kind of a little bit of GTA traveling, and then rep ball. All three of us snapped our shoulders before the age of 20, 21. My two buddies went down south. They snapped it while they were down south. So, yeah, I credit a lot of that to my success.
So tell me, I mean, at this point, we get introduced to a couple new coaches too at training camp. Tell me about, because he had an appreciation for the older guys, Coach Kemp, and what you're.
Yeah, no. I remember seeing him come in, and it's kind of, you see this big guy, and seems like he's just full of fun and joy, like a little goofy, and then you realize that the type of ball he played, and you're like, kid's got a resume. And I was really impressed with him, and I enjoyed Kemp, and obviously I wish if I was hitting, he would have been like the hitting version of someone that you would have always wanted to kind of guide you, right? And so I was really impressed with just getting to know him, and he was pretty influential on my life, to be honest. I mean, we can talk about that in a little while, but that's Daryl Kemp to me.
And Jeff Lounsbury comes into the mix at this point, and I've told everybody that it's like a coin flip with me. Initially, I was kind of it was wait and see with me, because Jeff, presented himself outwardly much differently than Coach McRae or Coach Kemp, or particularly the coaches I had early in my life, Gary Minix and
Same with me.
Ted's dad. Yeah, tell me a little bit about, and Jeff grows on you, and then really has really impressed me in the aftermath of my year playing with him. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts were on Jeff.
Well, I'll say this, great. I would have kind of characterized him the same way, as in comparison to Coach McRae. I found when he came to talk to me, it was for a purpose. Maybe it was around maybe things he wanted me to say to certain teammates, maybe to pick them up, right? Maybe if Coach McRae was thinking like, he wanted to maybe explode on somebody. So it'd go through Coach Lounsbury, come to me and say, we want you to go talk to so-and-so, or we need you to call so-and-so, and I was happy to do that. It was always delivered well. I had a great relationship with Coach Lounsbury, and probably, I don't remember if this was in camp or if it was just when the season started. And he sat me down. It was just him and I on the bench, and he's like, McRae, and I think you're afraid to let it go. And I was like, remember pausing, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, so. And it's looking back on it, what it meant was, there was times that I didn't want to go full out, because I'm thinking, it was always in the back of my head, right? That what if I snap my shoulder again? What if I can't do it? I can't, I try to go all out and I can't go all out. So it looked like you're hesitant. And he was like, don't be afraid to let it go. And he said it a certain way. And I was like, all right. And And you know what? I did okay after that. And I've looked at that. I've lived by that motto, like, kind of like, hey, don't be afraid to take a chance. And that between him and later on when I remember talking to McRae about that, it was so influential, not only for ball, but frankly, for where I'm at today is because I had those people tell me something that I needed to hear. And it was so influential at that time. And then I think from there, I wasn't afraid to let it go. I went all out. I went all out in drills. I went all out just kind of doing towel drill when guys were kind of half-assing it. I thought, no, I'm going to go all out. And it was, so from that standpoint, yeah, no, that is something. I don't remember all the little stuff. I remember saying some things around McRae, that made others laugh. I think Hoover used to always love my one zingers that I would kind of jolt off once in a while at McRae's expense. And but in all honesty, yeah, that's kind of one of the big things that stands out for me 30 years later.
Yeah, I do know that the coaches, looked at you as a kind of an in-house leader of the team, and would try to get messaging out by having conversations with you that were none of the rest of us were privy to. And I think that was a great, it was great that they saw you in that way. And more so, you can't do that with people that are seen as being, you have to have credibility to do that, because the reality is, if it's a coach's, pet project, for example, it's seen as a stool pigeon kind of scenario where the players can really rebel against that or resent it. You have to pick someone that legitimately the players would follow into battle. So I think that says a lot, Rob, that they chose you.
That means a lot. I appreciate that. I've always been one of those guys that believes that leaders eat last. And so it's nice that they viewed me that way, and more so that teammates could respond that way too in my approach. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we had a situation like that later in my career where the team rebelled, and it short circuits a team. So I think it just was. It says so much about your character. Do you remember what it was like when did you have any trepidation about making the team, or was it more just, I need to prep myself to be ready for the season? And what was it like when, we finally got to the end of camp and you make the team and it's kind of official?
Yeah. Great point. I remember, more so, I remember thinking that too, that first couple of days. And even when we did kind of like when we scrimmaged and stuff, and knowing the talent out there, I remember saying to myself, you better bring your best shit today, because like there's some boys up there that can hit the ball. And I remember that thinking, especially not, and even still, like, I guess I did okay, I guess, obviously, because I stuck around. I remember being really excited, because I really thought, like, I had no idea what our season was going to look like. I knew we were going to play a lot of ball. I knew we were going to go play games in the States. I can't remember if it was during camp or not. They brought up Cooperstown, and I thought, man, if we're going to play ball in Cooperstown, I need to be part of this. And so no, I was really excited, and that's probably, it was good news is when I made it. That's actually when I dropped a couple of courses on purpose, knowing that we were going to play a lot of ball, and I just a lot of expectations that I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, I was going to excel in, and something wasn't going to suffer from it. So yeah, it was great.
That's great. And obviously we go on to start the year and have some pretty amazing adventures on our path to nationals. Maybe just personally, did you have a couple of games or memories that really stand out? And I'll add a part B to that.
Sure.
Was there anything that you were observing as a person who played a lot of competitive ball and had some experience, things that you thought were unusual or special about the team?
Yeah, a couple of things stand out. I remember us being really, really excited, and you could see the team was nervous. We played our first game in St. Catharines, and I don't remember who we played against, but I remember Bottomley leading it off and hitting a double into the gap. And I remember everybody kind of exploding off the bench, like pumped for Ricky to hit this double. And I thought the kid set the tone for the year of like what we could be like by just when he hit that ball in the gap. And I thought that was great. Obviously, we had a ton of success, which was great. A couple of, I guess, I remember, some good games. I remember some good blowout games. I remember St. Bonaventure, like we were beating them, and I can't remember. Was I throwing that game? And I just remember one of the games that it literally they weren't happy that all of a sudden these Canadian kids have come down to their American school in front of their American fans, and we're beating them. And I remember the strike zone got about this big, and it was like belt high, middle fastball is the only thing that was a strike for us. And do you remember that game where that was what game Coach McRae got tossed?
Oh yeah,
that's one.
Yeah, I think
all time when he did that. And so I remember coming off. I'm sure that was the game because I actually remember being so pissed, and I just said, "I'm just going to throw at everybody's head." And he just looked at me and he was like, "You are never throwing at anybody's head." And he got right in my face, like, "Okay." And he goes, and he explained to me where I should be throwing to get somebody. And you throw right behind the lower back, and he's going to turn back into it. And he'll not forget that. He won't forget that you stung him there. And then I'll never forget when the umpire in St. Bonnie chucked him, and he did it. He was like almost like it was like right out of like Bull Durham. The ump did that big wind up, like "You're gone." And he threw him out, and I'll never forget Mike running out of the dugout yelling, "Oh, you want a show, do you?" And he went running out. And he turned his hat backwards and kicked dust on him. And then, do you remember this? Do you remember that when he got tossed that way?
Yeah, it was. And I talked to Lounsbury about this. They. You
remember that?
Yeah, I do, and I remember. Because it took me a long while to figure out how Mike would have come up with a line like that. Okay, like and I'll say it now. It's I think if there's little kids watching this podcast, just cover your ears,
Earmuffs.
Kids. But the line was, if you're gonna fuck me, kiss me first. And so there's a very obscure 1980s movie called Wanted Dead or Alive. And the guy that played Benson, the butler on that TV show, he cracks that line out in that movie. So McRae must have seen this movie at some point because that line he's used a few times apparently. And but I think the players loved that because it showed that this coach that we, was, very much guiding and disciplining and teaching us, was also willing to stand up and defend us when we were clearly getting jobbed. And, those weird scenarios, because there were a couple other times where it felt like the odds were a little bit stacked against us from an officiating standpoint. From then on in, you knew that we were a team that we were always all on the same page, but I think it just took some unifying elements to kind of get there.
Well, I'll even say that I think that was really unifying because I remember being back on the bus. We're in the back. We're driving back from St. Bonaventure. The bus is quiet, and the coaches were at the front of the bus. I remember kind of being farther back, and it was quiet. And I thought, I'm going to put my toe in the water. I'm going to say something. And I go, "Hey, Coach McRae," and he didn't even turn around. I remember hearing "What?" And I'm like, all I said was, that was the greatest line I've ever heard in a ball game. And I remember the bus laughing, and people started throwing zingers. And you're right. I think that there's stuff like that we knew we could do this, right? We're going to come together as one. And I do. You're absolutely right on that, Mike. And I think there's always kind of like key moments that in a long season, because that was a long year, right, for us. It was very short, but it was very long because it was, of how much we played in a short period of time, and we went on a nice little run after that. I do remember that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, this is something only two pitchers can really have this conversation, but it's a unique proposition to be a starting pitcher. It comes with, you are setting the tone that first, time you take the mound, because, if we were a home team, a lot of times we were taking the mound with a little bit of a lead and you immediately got to put up a zero. Um, if you are starting the back end of a doubleheader where we've lost the first game or didn't pitch well, and I've spoke a few times about Coach McRae giving it to me 2 pitches into a game once because we had a poor game the game before, and his expectation out of me, I think at that point, was senior guy, one of our starting pitchers that we're counting on here. He better go out and have a hell of a game to kind of just wash off the dirt of the previous game. But and if you're on the road and, a lot of times, again, then you're wanting to shut down set the immediate tone. There's a lot of pressure that comes with being a starting pitcher. It is a different world because you have to have some of that performance mentality. You got to rise up and accept the responsibility. You have to thrive under pressure. Tell me a little bit about emotionally what goes through your head and what kind of philosophy you bring to the game as a starting pitcher. And did is something that you really loved and thrived in that role?
Yeah. You're totally right, Mike. I loved getting ready for it. And again, from coming back from being strategic, especially, going into that year, we'd be playing against whoever. I didn't know who I was facing. I didn't know their lineup. I didn't know who were their hitmen were in that lineup. So you were learning as you go. So, I remember going, I can only control what I can control. I can control how I can mix speeds, getting the ball down, getting the ball up. And I would, coming back to like that Maddox philosophy is like, all right, I remember how I pitched this kid in his first at bat. I'm going to flip it in this second at bat, or try to flip it in the second at bat, to keep them off guard and, change speeds. And so, but you're right. And I think it's more of like a self pressure that you put on. And I've been always one of those that I love it. I've never shied away from that type of pressure. I want the ball, getting a couple guys on base, didn't faze me because I was like, all right, I'm going to get out of this. How am I going to get out of it? Right. That whole positive attitude, positive focus is something that I think you need as a starting pitcher, right? You need to kind of have that calmness, right? Because it's not a sprint. If you're just coming in and you're a closer, you can come in, you can bring it, and you've got hopefully get out of there in a dozen pitches. You don't want that person to go to 30 pitches because either they're not built for it, maybe physically or emotionally. Whereas, the starters, it's kind of like, hey, we want you to get through 5 or 6, and how long can you stretch this out? And what was fun is we had a bunch of guys that could do that, right? Joel, Ebel, yourself, and I would kind of like, we'd be good taking the ball and kind of trying to, control that a little bit. I always admired that with Ebes. He was great at that, right? If it's an off game, he could come in and be that good steady Eddie. And so no, I loved having the ball that way. I thought it was. I never wanted to come out. I hated it.
Yeah, me too. I think.
Ball. So.
Yeah, I was raised under the
getting pulled.
Yeah, like I always felt bad, even when when Coach McRae would come out. You knew if Coach McRae was coming out, he was coming to pull you.
Yeah.
But he would get the stare of death from me as he started to walk out of that dugout, and he'd be like, he'd usually say "good job" or whatever, and I would just kind of grunt at him, and I had a special. And I don't know what you recall of your relationship with Coach Topping, but Tim and I had a special relationship in that he's again one of 2 coaches, pitching coaches that I've ever had that understood that, that with me, I was a lot different than you, and a lot of pitchers actually, a bit of an aberration that way. There's a few in my career, usually left-handed guys like I was, that were similar. And the odd time you'd see it in a righty. I played with a couple later in my career that were like this, but for me, it was an emotional battle to just the way I had to approach pitching as a starter was. I felt like I was the enforcer for the team. I was there to impose my will on the other team. So that means I had to bully them and be a big ogre and be scary and not let anyone ever beat me. So for me, giving up a base runner was an affront, and some personal affront. And probably given my general lack of ability to hold base runners and horrific ability to field, it was probably just a good policy for me. But I was a kind of a big bullying kind of left-handed pitcher who threw the ball pretty hard, so I could get away with a lot of stuff that other folks couldn't get away with because my ball also moved about 4 to 5 inches as a natural fastball. It just had a lot of margin for error, so that was kind of good. But it also allowed, especially those, I think the 4 starters, we always set an emotional tempo for things, and the team would feed off of that. So they would feed off of, you're the gutsiest pitcher I've ever seen in my life. We'll talk about this at Nationals. It's not even close. Ebel was the most composed professional pitcher I remember. Joel was a little bit of a, more of a lightning in a bottle. When he was on, man, that guy got a lot of swing, and he had tons of swing and miss stuff.
Yeah.
And, my career is fairly well documented. Like 3 out of 4 games, it'd be at least 2 of them would be lights out, and there would be, the game wouldn't be close generally because I wouldn't give up a lot of base runners or hits. One of them would be more of a battle, and then every 4th game I would be horrible. And this was just a pattern in my entire career. Even I had one year where I had an ERA under 1 in a league. But the one time that I gave up a run, it was, in a bad situation. I just had a bad game or I was struggling. So I would always have, that was just my pattern. But I think people liked me because I was like our own soccer hooligan. The other team would come up and say hi, and I'd be like, "What?" And I'd headbutt them. That's kind of how we did it. So we all had our own style of getting there. But I think setting the emotional tone comes with its own set of internal battles. So did you ever feel like during the course of the year, you got more confident as it rolled along, or because for you it was, you're battling the physicality of your body as opposed to most of the rest of us, who I don't think, other than I had blister problems, and I think Ron developed a bit of an elbow piece at the end there. I think everyone else was relatively healthy all year, and you're having to fight a battle on 2 fronts, not only performance, but physically staying together.
I would say, I would say, especially after I really started, as again, coming back to what Lounsbury was said about letting it go, and that really helped. And then, but I would find that, kind of I'd go home, I'd have like 3 bags of peas that were labeled, my roommate's label, Rob's peas, and right? Then they're like, yeah, I remember somebody's girlfriend came over and said, "There's peas we could eat," and they're like, "Don't touch those," right? Because after a while, students, you'd be like, "No, I can just keep using them." They're like, "This is disgusting. You gotta go get something new to use." So, but yeah, I'd come home and I'd have to ice my shoulder, my elbow, and then from icing it, I'd start my neck would hurt, so I'd have to ice my neck, and then, as I said, I'd end up in Joe Kinney's for a day. God, shit about that guy, a big bottle of scotch to say the least, because, so I'd be there and then go back to practice and I'd feel good. And I think a lot of it, as I said, had to do with that repetition, whether it was the towels or how we stretched, were fantastic. So but I knew right when I got the ball again that I never wanted to let down anybody on our team. So I'll go. And yeah, no, I'm so no, like it was. I felt like I got stronger as the year went on. I really did. And I remember, you know, I think it was one of the times I remember with Coach Topping was it was in somewhere in New York State, and I was struggling with my curveball. I just lost it for a little while, and which when I didn't throw 89, so for me it was I needed to. With my fastball look faster. We throw in different speeds, and he helped me with something. I don't know if it was just changing a grip or something a little bit. I totally remember this. And then I remember throwing a Fletch in the bully, and I was like, oh, I found my curveball. And I think after that, I remember the next start I had was down in Durham, and I think I struck out like 11 in 6 innings or something like that. And it was after that I had a lot of success with it, like to end the season going into nationals and stuff. So yeah, no, it's but again, just I think that's, and I'm sure other guys could say the same, is like, just when you suddenly go from playing ball every day, good thing, like, could I do it now? And I'd be dead if I did it now. But like, thank God we're all like 21, 22 years old. But yeah, just the amount of physical work that we all put in is a testament. It really is. Like, I tell everybody that, like, kudos to all the guys that, that you're talking to and that were part of our team that came to play every day, came to practice every day. We played doubleheaders like all over the place for 2 months straight. I don't know how many games we played in total.
Jeff says 32, I think, or some number like that. But I remember we also played exhibition games and a few other things. So I don't know. Maybe my memory is not so great after 30 years. It's a lot of brain cells of
yesterday. So like this has been an effort, but I know for sure it was still, even to play 32 games in 60 days, like, because when was Nationals the best, right? It was the end of October. It was referendum weekend, which is insane. How did our parents let us go? Referendum weekend voting. And there we are on a bus, like, coming from Ontario to play ball. It's snowing out. Remember how cold it was too? So
I remember that. And I remember that. So first off, we're going in a bus to Nationals, and there are 1,000 buses pouring into Quebec because I think everyone that was there for the no vote, they just flooded the province. But I remember the amount of advertising and everything, and just thinking, I feel like we're, a small little salmon in this huge river of salmon swimming upstream. It was crazy. And then, you start the tournament off against Dalhousie. Now, at the time, I think everyone's like, oh, it's a team from the East Coast, blah, blah, blah. We know nothing about them. But that Dalhousie team was amazing and won the national championship the next year with a guy that was the first ever, I think, other than maybe the guy from Laval that had played pro ball, was the first ever SEBA athlete to sign a pro contract with the Expos, Trevor Wambach. And that Dalhousie team was great. And you drew the very first starting assignment of the tournament against those guys. Did you feel any extra pressure kicking off the tournament?
Well, I remember this. Like, we were getting ready. I think they played before us too. And so they were playing back-to-back games. And we were warming up. And it was a night game too, wasn't it?
Yep.
And I remember some guy hitting a grand slam for Dal. As soon as he hit it, he stood at the plate with his arms over his head. And I remember, and I was warming up real close to that, and Coach McRae wasn't too far from me. And I remember screaming at some guy at the bench. I'm like, you guys do that against us, the next guy's going to like effing eat it. And I remember McRae looking at me and starting to laugh. And he was like, you're ready. And I remember going in there with just fire in my belly and just like, you know what, I'm going to own this. And no one's stopping me. And again, that total belief of, that I knew I was ready. And then, what I remember about that game, and that might've been, I don't remember the kid's name you said for Dal, but I think he was their 3 or 4 hitter. And I remember throwing a really good I don't remember if it was the first inning. I think it was the first inning too. I remember the first two guys got out. He stood up, and I threw a real good, low, hard like slider, and he golfed it. One two hopper off the fence, and it was like a missile. And I remember like looking back at his number, going, "Okay, I better remember that number because that kid could hit a ball." And but I do remember like, the next couple of guys, I remember thinking I gotta have some good stuff here. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of great memories from nationals, to say the least.
Yeah, I think it, given the construct of the pitching staff, no one was better to start the tournament off. And, we all pitched pretty inspired games through that, but you are part of one of the greatest memories I've ever seen on a ball field, because it gave me your nickname forever, which was Guts, Rob Guts Green, which kind of sounds brutal in retrospect. It makes it feel like you're wearing a
21 and 22. We didn't know better.
No, but you got
talking about this story. I know where this is going.
Oh yeah. So like I played for 16 years. I never got hit with a line drive ever in my life, and mostly because if the ball was coming anywhere near me, I would quickly get out of the way. That's kind of how I make no illusions. Fielding my position is just I'm allergic.
It's overrated.
Yeah, very. Just don't give up. Just don't allow people to hit it near you. But I would like to say that was the case. But most of the time, I would just dance out of the way and either let it go. I should have had it, and it goes for a hit, or thankfully, I always played with some great second basemen and shortstops that would pick up a lot. But you got hit with the single hardest line drive back to the mound that I have ever seen in my entire life. And I cannot believe that we're still talking, because I think it sounded like a shotgun blast. And I remember it knocking you completely off your feet and down. And I remember thinking, oh my God, he's dead. And then somehow you revived and threw the ball to first and then collapsed again. But, tell me what that was like, because I've never seen anyone hit that hard in my life.
My hands are sweating thinking about it. I remember that. So I remember, I think it was the same kid I just described that hit that double, was up that second time. And if there's two things I guess I look back, I'm proud of my pitching career. Same. I rarely gave up a home run. And I thought, if I'm going to give it up, and give it up in style. So the ones I did give up probably went like 440. I never gave up a bomb at Brock, and I'd never really gotten hit. I'd gotten close, where I've almost been hit a couple times. But I remember that kid, and I was trying to throw it in, and it must have just kind of came back over the middle of the plate, and my back foot was still in the air. So I was finishing my motion, my back foot was still in the air, and that thing came back at me. If that thing was like 8-10 inches higher, maybe probably foot higher, it's hitting me in the face, and I am not getting out of the way. That thing was a missile. And funny too, going back when we were growing up, remember Charlie Brown? We talked about when Charlie Brown was pitching and you get hit and you see stars, his glove was flying, his hat goes flying. We used to talk about when people get hit. We used to joke about getting Charlie Brown. And so that ball came back. I remember it just hit me, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I could feel take the wind out of me. But I remember just kind of seeing it kind of roll over a little bit. And I remember just kind of running off the mound real quick, grabbing the ball, flipping it to first, and then darkness. And I was down, and I was just trying to catch my breath. And I remember Craig coming out, which is kind of everybody likes this because it's kind of the funny, but also I kind of have that humor too, the shortcomings of others. And my kids have that, which is funny to watch, but we try to get that out of them a bit. But I remember him coming up to me, and he's got a smile on his face, like, you okay? Because he was like, you just took a shot. And I remember looking at him, and I remember I had tears coming out of my eyes. And I was like, I got Charlie Brown. And I remember him laughing. And I'll never forget that. And he goes, "Man," goes, you coming out? And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I remember telling him, I think my words were, I'm not fucking going anywhere. And I'm like, give me the ball. And I think they let me throw a couple pitches and I kept going. And that would have been, I don't know what inning that would have been. Call it the fourth. And I remember I kept going, but I remember thinking to myself on the bench, I'm like, oh man, my insides are like on fire right now. Like it was just like a burn. It just felt like someone did that. Who on our team? This is going to come out. Was it Thompson or was it someone else that was rollerblading and fell and had the biggest road rash ever? He couldn't play for like a few weeks and he had like huge jabs. Who was that on our team?
I don't remember that, so I will have to.
It was simple.
Okay.
And that's how I described it. I'm like, it just felt like everything was on fire. And so two things. I remember the next time I got to the sixth and a guy got on first and this guy came up to bat. And that's when McRae took me out. He's like, this guy, and I remember on the bench, he said, I'll never forget, he said, he's already got you. This is a kid who got you before. And I'm like, don't worry, I was about to hit him. I was going to get him back. Because I just saw him coming up and I'm like, this guy's going to eat it. I'm just throwing it right off his numbers. And so obviously didn't get that experience. It was probably a smart move to take me out because we obviously won the game. It was what was most important. But I had perfect stitch marks from a baseball, like perfect stitch marks, and I got a ball. You can probably see it somewhere behind me. And there you go. You can see it hanging in my glove still right there on my bookcase. But oh yeah, I bet you I had perfect stitch marks in my sides for probably a good 2 weeks. And then it was a couple of years later, I went to see an osteopath because I was like, my back was bugging me the whole bit. And it could have been that, it could have been something else. But you basically have like little caps that go on the end of your ribs. Like I had 2 out of place. And he's like, did you get violently hit in your midsection at all? And I'm like, well, yeah, it was a funny story. So that's probably what it was from. But yeah, that was well, I'm glad you love that story. Right? So.
I still remember my reaction in dugout because I had to chart the game because I was pitching the next one, and I remember I think I turned to Coach Topping and went, "Oh my God, he's been shot. Where's the grassy knoll?" Right? Like it was unbelievable. But so we get to the end of that year, and why don't you tell me a little special moment you had with Daryl Kemp, because it kind of sets up the next chapter of your life a little bit, but just very random. It's kind of a very Daryl thing to do, who would sometimes have random conversations with people. And
I actually think I was charting a game and he just looked at me out of nowhere during the game. He's like, so what are you going to do when you graduate? And I'm like, I don't know. I really hadn't, I was living in the now. It really was. I didn't have that foresight to know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to own my own business someday. I knew it wasn't right away. I was going to go work in a bank. I had no clue. Obviously, we didn't have like the same internet knowledge that everyone has today. But he's like, you should meet my brother. And his brother, Rick Kemp, was the regional manager at London Life. And fast forward, I did the on-campus recruiting the next year because I didn't graduate. That was my 4th year, and I stayed another year at Brock. I didn't play ball though. And hindsight, wish I did. But anyhow, I did the on-campus recruiting with Rick, and then my natural market was Burlington. His market was more selling like individual insurance, financial planning. And I didn't feel, being 23 years old, that was my market. I didn't feel comfortable going to talk to somebody who's 60 years old about their money when I'm just coming out of school. So, but I love the corporate side. And so he introduced me to a buddy of his who was running the employee benefit division at London Life back in Burlington. He just started. He connected me with him and I got hired, and off I went for where my main career is today.
Well, we'll get into the entrepreneurial journey, but before we do that, interested to understand what drove your decision not to play in year 2, and also you met your wife at Brock.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that story. We don't have a lot of people talk about people talk very warmly about their wives, but not a lot of them met them on campus.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's get both those stories.
Sure. How about I remember we were looking to play spring ball. I
Yep.
remember us having a meeting, and honestly, I remember the conversation being, if you're not playing spring ball, you're not playing fall ball. And at that point, because I deferred classes to play our league, and I'm like, I just was honest. I'm like, I can't. Like, I got heavy course load, right? I'm already, I deferred classes on purpose, and so there wasn't any give. So I I chose not to play spring ball because I had like a heavy like exam load and course load, and as I mentioned, we were running that coming out just running the campus rec conference, and so yeah, I thought that was it. I was done, and I remember seeing Daryl Kemp at that Lone Life office when I went on for on-campus recruiting the following winter, so my end of my last year, and I think Brock had lost hosting the Nationals. They think they didn't win in that last year as well, and then I remember he was pretty pissed to learn I was still at school, and then I didn't play, and
Yeah,
so in hindsight, if it is what it is now, but if somebody had called me that summer and said, "Yeah, come play fall ball," I would have been there in a heartbeat. I'm going to be really honest. Um, so which is it is what it is now. I don't think I would have made the difference in that. It was a great squad. So, but yeah, it was just too bad I kind of went out that way. But for meeting my wife, it was kind of like all the way through, even going back to so it had been my second year, was her first year. Her name's Heather. And so she was in the rec program, and that whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon we were like 3 degrees. I remember a friend of mine from high school, we were going to see a girlfriend who moved into a place around the corner. Her second year as well. And then her name is Shelly, and Shelly's roommate was Heather. So I met her there for the first time. And then the next year, my roommate, a guy named Kevin, Kevin and Heather worked together that summer back in Burlington. And, he would call her and he'd go over to visit her. And so I would talk to like Heather on the phone, or just I go with them. And then, anyways, Kevin, my roommate, married Heather's roommate, Shelly. So, or Sandy, sorry, Shelly, Sandy. And so it was just kind of like those 6 degrees. And then, but I didn't date Heather until probably half dozen years after leaving Brock. And that was actually a buddy of mine from going back to my campus rec connection, said, you know what? He was married at this time. And he's like, his wife, Martha's got a great friend. You got to meet her. I'm like, listen, don't set me up on blind dates. I've had enough. No, I think you really like this girl. You might remember her from Brock. Her name's Heather. So it was great. So we connected, funny, by accident, at a big bar, and that was big back in the day, Emma's back porch in Burlington. Just unexpectedly, I didn't want to be there that night. I was driving around some idiots for a bachelor party, and I'm like, I'll get you there. And I was exhausted, and I'm like, you can go there, and then I'm leaving. And then she was vice versa. Her girlfriend wanted her to go out, and she didn't want to go out, so they went, and her and I bumped into each other, and kind of went from there. We had our first date about a month later, and then you can skip all that stuff, like what's your favorite color and where you're from and all that stuff, right? So yeah, went from there. And so it's what are we going to be? So we got married in 2005. So there you go. Yeah.
My goodness, love is in the air, Rob.
Love's in the
So tell me a little bit about your journey into becoming an entrepreneur and the decision to get involved with running your own company, which is, I think a lot of people have illusions about. They don't understand that, especially in the early years, it's a ton of sacrifice and a lot of hard work for, not the kinds of returns that everyone kinds of thinks it does. You really got to work hard and grind those first few years. Tell me a bit about that journey and kind of what you've learned along the way and what's been gratifying about it.
Do you have an hour? So, you and I could go on and on. I was obviously the same. You and I have had chats about entrepreneurship, and if there's times when people are like, oh, it must be nice. You can do this. You can write this off. And I'm like, listen, here are my keys. Let me tell you my journey I've been on. So my journey, I worked at London Life. That coming back to that Darryl Kemp introduction from his brother to Burlington. I'd only been at London Life for about 8 months, specialized in the employee benefit group retirement area. So we would help design and manage employee benefit programs for companies, small, mid-sized companies is what we do. And London got bought by another insurer. So the joke was anybody who's expensive got a package, and they kept everybody who was cheap, which was me. And so it was great. So I learned how 2 major insurers operated. I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be. I didn't find it rewarding working, right? It was a steady job, it was a steady pay, but I never liked the idea of somebody setting my pay. I wanted to, if I worked harder and was successful, I wanted to be rewarded for it. Again, coming back to pitching, I wanted, wanting the ball and wanting you could be the GOAT, or you could be, right. You could be the cost of the game. So I had no problem with that risk, and I saw an opportunity to be different. And so the gentleman who got a package when London got bought by Great West, who was my boss, started his own firm. And so I followed him, and that would have been 2001. So that's actually when we were in a recession and business was really tough. I was going to start with one client, which I was splitting with them 50-50, the commission. I was going to make $800 for the whole year. And I started like old school cold calling, telling people what I was going to do. He gave me like a $20,000 draw, which I had to pay back. So if I didn't exceed that dollar amount, like I owed him money. So kind of like that old like Eminem song, like success is my only option, failure is not. Like there wasn't. But I believed in it. I believed in everything I was doing. And then actually it was, you talk about a grind and overcoming adversity. Like, everybody's got a great story, and mine was no different. I came back from, so at this point, my parents had separated. My dad went one way, my mom went another way. I had nowhere to live. And I lived with a buddy for a year. I lived in a room that was smaller than this like home office I'm in right now. It was like a closet of a room. I took that room because I paid less than he did. I couldn't afford the whole rent. And then after a year, he left and moved to London to be with his girlfriend, and I had nowhere to go. And that's my buddy, who was his dad coached us growing up. My best buddy, Ron, he had just gotten married, and I moved into the spare bedroom in his wife's house, and I could have easily just gone and got another job. And at this time, I'm still working for this other gentleman, but I thought, no, I'm going to make this work because I believe in this philosophy, and I'm just going to go. And I didn't have a work-life balance. I worked. And I used to tell my buddies, like, like they want to go for beers on a Friday. I'd say, I'm not feeling that good. And that became a joke for a while. Like, oh, here's Rob, Friday night flu. I didn't have $20 to my name. But I kept going and I kept going. And then to the point, built a nice little business. And the gentleman I was working for wanted to accomplish two different things, really. And there's more to that, but I'll leave it at that. And so I started my own completely entrepreneurship firm. I left, it was in 2009. So again, so in 2008, I had a fallout with him. I lost my dad. 2 weeks later, my first daughter was born. It was an emergency C-section for my wife. It was one of those where probably had been a home birth. They probably both would have died. Mm-hmm. So it was real traumatic, but all I knew is I needed to go start my own firm with my own vision. And my buddies were like, you sure you want to do this? So that was about 4 or 5 months later, I did it while my wife was off. I left like half of my client revenue behind, and decided to blaze my own trail. And so, fast forward today, it's got 2 offices, full-time team of 15. And, recognized for what we do is one of the larger, privately owned firms in the province for what we specialize in doing, which has been really exciting. You talk about entrepreneurship, it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. You get up, you think about it, you go to bed, you're thinking about it. You got to make those sacrifices. I've probably lost friendships along the way, and I don't mean that, but I knew I needed a path to go on, and where I wanted to be. And probably the best thing I did was I really wanted to find centers of influence that could help me grow and mentor me. And you got to go searching for those individuals. And some of them ended up being clients and they're buddies now. And they've been very successful careers and hired business coaches and stuck with the ones that, I could really relate to and pushed me. No different. Like, if you like coming back to sports is like, being a sports kid, I built my team with that sports mentality, right? That, you need all the, everybody rowing the same way in the boat. And when you get those teammates that believe those same philosophies you do, it makes business a little bit more fun, just like it made ball fun for us, right? So
it's outstanding to hear that, Rob. And I know that you've also given back a ton. So, let's talk a bit about a fundraiser that you're involved with that involves anything but baseball cleats. Because I've seen you in this, and I'm like, I can't believe that he would allow himself to be pictured in a pair of pink strappy high heels. But
you bet.
Why don't we go there?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So, well, first off, I've been a big believer. You give back to the community that gives you so much, and I've always been a believer. We live in a great country. I won't get into politics because it makes me my blood pressure go up. It makes me mental, but nobody should ever be left behind in this great country we live in. And unfortunately people are. And, so I got involved with the YWCA in Hamilton probably in 2007 or 8. And they wanted to start an event called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. And so I knew the CEO, a good client of ours too. And she's like, Rob, I'd love you to be involved, and help us kind of spread the word. And can you start on the board and building out this event? And in my brain, I'm like, you have no time. You got a brand new baby at home and just growing out my business. And I said, sure, I'd love to. And right, idiot. But it was the best thing I've done. And funny, just having flashback. So get the community involved was big. And so I went with the CEO to see like the chief of police, get the police department's buy-in, get them to come do this. Because really the concept of Walk a Mile in Her Shoes is they were raising money for their transitional living program. So a lot of women that have had to leave maybe a violent relationship and they have nowhere to go. And so they provide them housing, food, shelter, safety, and then especially, help. How do they get on their own 2 feet? And so the thought process is that there's so many people that are not, come walk a mile in her shoes of what she's got to experience. So at first where it's like, kind of like, oh yeah, here's, here I am, like, walking around in high heels. And yeah, my buddies would take shots. And I'm like, you can give me shots as long as you give me $100. So I've always been big on like giving back. We've done everything from matching, donation for that. So what I love about that event, which started at nothing years ago, I've had a teammate get involved on the board since, and now that event raises close to $150,000 annually for the Y, and so which is great. I think it's come a long way in 15, 16 years. So yeah, I've been big on giving back. We do that. I think everybody should be doing that. I'm going to start doing charity days in 2024 for my staff to give them a couple of days off as long as they want to volunteer in the community, whatever they want to do. We've always given back as an organization. Our whole team gets involved, whether it's from shelters to, there's a great organization in Burlington called the Schiffer House, which this lady's like a living saint, takes in kids. Most of them are teenagers who have gotten pregnant and got nowhere to go. And without her, they'd be on the street. And so we've years past, what we've done is just kind of, we've always kept it out of the papers. It's not we don't do it for recognition. It's a great thing to do. And kind of makes you feel good, right? That back. That's why I've been big on that. I'll challenge everybody to do that. Just go find something and or just to put your arm around somebody, or how you can help somebody else. It doesn't take a lot of necessarily money. It takes time, and sometimes volunteering your time is the best gift you can give.
Yeah, it brings us full circle to a conversation you and I had about maintaining a relationship with Brock University in the baseball program, and that there are more innovative ways that they could be doing this, because it's tended to be traditionally, chasing business owners and alumni for a check. And sometimes, that's the easiest thing to do. And depending on, when you catch a business, yeah, maybe there's a little tax incentive, or you're near the year end of fiscal and you do something like that. But it seems very limiting, given that one of the things that we've talked about is being a business owner, we could be providing internships or hiring graduates. And between our general Rolodexes of other people that we deal with who are in decision-making roles, we could be helping get people placed in their field of employment, or business mentoring, as you've talked about. We could be helping other graduates of the baseball program or getting into entrepreneurial fields. I just think that, particularly the way that alumni or people who have participated in the program, the thinking needs to change around that, because it's been, shooting the shotgun out there as opposed to shooting a rifle. And what are your thoughts on that, and your ability to stay connected to our baseball program and our university, just with different thinking?
How about this? Well, first of all, you're bang on. Second, you do a great job in trying to bridge this right now. I need everybody to know that, Mike. You do such a good job, and you should give yourself more credit for what you're doing there. So kudos. And I think this is huge. I think this is an opportunity. I think not just Brock, but I think so many Canadian universities have missed that opportunity to do what a lot of the U.S. schools do a fantastic job doing. And that is, we're not going to go down there and help the ball players, play or position or coach. They got coaches to do that. But we're coming out of these programs, the ability to absolutely do that, help these kids, guide them with, if there's a future choice between all of us, we probably know somebody that'd be linked to a program, is using baseball, our program as an example, that could maybe open a door for somebody. And the hardest thing for some people to do is just get in the door, right? Get that initial meeting, get that consultation. And so, I think that this could be a much better job. I've never enjoyed just getting a letter from Brock in the mail saying, "Hey, we'd love your financial support." I'm like, okay, why? What are you going to do with it? Right? Give me a story. Give me a reason. Give me something more than just me cutting a check. And, and I do, Mike, I think, how many kids, the ability that so many of us have now is the ability to pay it forward. And listen, we're all looking for good young talent, and some of the best people I've hired are former athletes, right? They have that athletic mentality, the ability that, that you got to put in the effort to get the results. And, you're going to work on a team. And guess what? You might not love all your teammates one day when you're playing sports. I tell my kids all the time. But you got to find a way to work together for a common goal. And guess what? Business works the same way. Whether you're in the public sector or private sector, it doesn't matter. It's the same philosophy. And I think that's where, not only athletics, but people who've played a varsity sport, can really gain from that ability, right? From using people like ourselves as mentors, with whether we personally can't, but we all probably know somebody who can, coming back to the 6 degrees. Listen, when I got hired, at London Life, they interviewed hundreds of people for 12 jobs. They didn't ask me what my grades were, right? They didn't ask how well I did in calculus. They talked more about baseball, right? Going back to that Rick Kemp, before he introduced me, Rick, Carol's brother, Rick, and I talked about ball for 25 minutes. And then he saw enough in just what I said. I didn't even know what I was saying, that impressed him enough to interview me. So, it's, I think there's so much opportunities that the university is missing. And maybe it just takes one person to step up and say, we'll create that kind of like annual mentorship program. And it could be, right? Could be a day back at the school that we can get involved with, or at least now with technology, right? You could do it videos. There's so many different ways we could do it now than just right. Then we could have leveraged 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I take that responsibility. This whole experience of pulling together the team back again after 30 years, it extends to our teammates too. If you, and I brought this up on Larry Houston's podcast where I've had five people that I was close friends with or ex teammates, give into their mental health issues and exit this planet a little early.
I'm sorry.
And it's a lot, right? And a lot of times it's because there's a sense of, I have no other option. There's no one here to even, buy me a coffee or listen to me or help me with my job search after I've lost my job, or, I'm going through a divorce.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the hell this is all about. There's people out there that can help be an island in a storm out there. And I take that responsibility of being a teammate. And when I say teammate, I use a broader term, anyone that's ever touched or been in the Brock program, even if I've never met them, or, that's being a teammate. And I think that that's something that we can all apply moving forward, because we've been through a period here where we had COVID, which was intensely self-isolating and, created lots of issues for lots of people, like mentally and emotionally, where I think it just heightens that responsibility that we all carry that says, okay, it just brings me back to being a pitcher, right? Like at the end of the day, it's your time up, and it says, okay, it's time for me to go out there and be the first line of defense again, for the team. So, I think it's a healthy attitude to have, and something that, I want to encourage all of our ex-teammates or anyone that's been involved with the Brock program or the McMaster program, or as you say, it is so hard to find talented people that and I'll use his name because he would appreciate it, but the vice president of Group M Sports and Live, which is the largest sports sponsorship activation agency in the country, is always looking for great people. They need people to be able to help present the relationship between brand and sports. And, there's a business program at Brock. There are people in finance. It doesn't really, the education isn't going to matter as much as your passion and your love for sports and your ability to be competitive.
Yep.
And these are great training grounds for these things. And I think have always been the strength of a Brock graduate or someone who's attended the university, is they have a little bit of grit in their gut. And, I'm putting it out there that we as a group are always willing to stand up for that. But, so please reach out. Rob, what do you've got a couple of kids you got to prep for university. That's going to be tons of fun.
Yeah.
But I also know that this has been a year where you've experienced some great joys in your life, including the big M that's on the front of your shirt there. Why don't you talk about your love of Michigan Wolverines football and what it was like winning a national championship, and maybe how that all came to be?
Well, how about this? This is kind of talk about like story. Brock has a big influence on that, but so obviously they were just being on TV a lot, right? Living in Burlington, for the game of the week on college football, it'd been Michigan, and they were great back in the day. One of my best buddies who I lived with those last 2 years, his family's from Kalamazoo, Michigan, so him and I would just instantly bonded over Michigan football. And then that's when the Fab Five was out, right? From the basketball standpoint with Weber and all those guys. So, excuse me. So, yeah, I just became a big Michigan fan. And then, several years, I would have probably been about 10 years ago, like probably 15 years ago, my wife and I would start going to games. We just buy, StubHub tickets or whatever and go down, and the two of us would go down and watch a game, try to do it kind of every other year, and we love doing it every year. And then Joel Garton's dad, Dave, very successful businessman and big sports guy, and he's a Michigan alum as well. him and I are talking business one day, and he sees a Michigan coffee mug on my desk because I got Michigan T-shirt under this. I'm actually wearing my Michigan sweats right now, so yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm pretty much a diehard, and so he says to me, he goes, "Do you know I have season tickets?" And I was like, "Freaking no!" I mean, I've been buying scalpers all these years, and you got tickets, so I just kept using his tickets, and then a couple of years ago, during the pandemic, he called me and he said, "I'm looking to give up my tickets," and I'm like, "I'll take them," because I'd been on the season wait list for tickets for years. I just basically gave up because even though it holds 110,000 people, it was impossible to get seasons. So I took over his season tickets, and so kind of full circle, right? Going back that Dave did, and I'd see Dave and Joel from, of course, around town, early on, and I don't get a chance to see him. I probably haven't seen Joel in few years, so it was great to see the podcast the other day, so thanks for doing that. But so took over that, and then my whole family's now Michigan fans. I've made buddies and clients Michigan fans, and so I rotate the tickets with clients, and checked off a bucket list item this year. I was actually at the Michigan Ohio game, so that was, anybody who knows that rivalry, I joked people, it was my fourth happiest day of my life after marrying my wife and my two girls being born. That was kind of that was a treat. And then so that's our love of Michigan. That's kind of a nice little moment. And next fall we're going to be taking the girls down with friends of ours. They're going to get tickets, and the 8 of us with their kids are going to go down to a game. So just love the rivalry. And so it's 2024 is already a great year for me, like on January 8th, right? So it worked out well. Yeah, it was fun.
That's great. Robbie, after you stay in touch with a lot of our fellow ex-players from that first year, or is this going to be, like kind of opening up a Forrest Gump box of chocolates? You're going to see a lot of people for the first time since Brock.
Buddy, other than kind of keeping in touch now with you and up until when you reached out to me last year to talk about doing the reunion game, other than probably Joel and seeing Kapusa here and there, I've literally lost touch with everybody. So I'm excited to see everybody, and it's I love the podcast. I haven't a chance to listen to all of them yet. It's been a little nuts in my world, but I plan on doing that, sitting around and watching all the podcasts that you've been doing. So it's heard like a bit of Todd, right? To see what Todd's been through, and we all knew what he was been through at Brock. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see people and to hear what people's up to. And I think this is good. It gives a good prelude to, I can have those conversations with people a little bit, knowing a little bit what they've experienced, because obviously that was a very small time in our lives now, baseball, but it's kind of neat to see how it's impacted people in different ways, and maybe what it springboarded people to do, and most of all hearing good old stories from a team that that we just came together and went all the way to the finals. It's a pretty cool accomplishment.
Yeah, I really, it was amazing to see Todd, and because the pitching staff in particular of that crew, we're all really caught off guard by Todd losing his eyesight.
Sure.
And because we all saw Todd as he had already been at Brock for a couple of years, so he was one of the older guys, but because he had to learn how to pitch basically from scratch, he was this guy that came in with this amazing attitude, but started as a catcher. He was out in Nanticoke, which for most of us is, where the hell is that?
Sure.
We were all always pulling for, there were a couple of, a few players that kind of had that everyone would collectively pull for them when they were out there. And I remember that being the case with you, with Todd, a little bit of Mark Kasoyan, just because Mark was such a unique character. Rick Bottomley inspired that a lot. Was a guy that just everyone genuinely liked.
You gravitate. Yeah. We had a great team. There's lots of people you could gravitate to, and then whether it was just someone's laugh or just they would do something stupid and everybody'd laugh, and it just, right, it was just, Yeah, I think that's what one of the things I loved about the Brock team. It reminded me a lot of those Burlington teams I played on, is that we just had each other's back.
Yeah.
For argument's sake, and for a big squad that we came coming together, and it's different ages, right? Some people are experienced and living on their own for the first time, and there's other people like you and I at the flip end that are looking to graduate more so, right? And we've kind of experienced that. So it's a big gap from just experiences more than age. And I absolutely right. It's gonna be fun to see people. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, in retrospect, it's hard to measure the difference between a 22 or a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old. But when you put it in that context, it's 20 or 25% more life that you've experienced. So,
Yeah.
I always just felt one of the strengths of the veteran personalities and people who'd been there a while was that we just set a good example for the kids that came after, and our championship ring, and I've said this on a lot of podcasts, are going to be measured by our accomplishments in life. This is going to be a winning team in life because so many people have gone on to do extraordinary things, and it's due to something that Coach McRae would have said, or due to something that, a moment where Coach Kemp would have said something that got you laughing as opposed to beating yourself up for something. It would have been a moment where people rise to the occasion and in a way that you've never seen before. So I think that those are all amazing things. And I will say this from, you and I having some, some shared road here. People need to keep an eye on what you're doing because it's extraordinary, and the best is yet to come in Rob Green's life.
That's very kind, man. That's very kind. I appreciate that. And likewise, it's same with you of what you've been able to accomplish, and right. Someone's got to interview you, buddy. On the flip side, okay, that's the next interview. Just so you.
Well, my God, Jesus, people are not going to believe some of the stuff that I mean, maybe they will. It'll be like typical lefty, but. I have frozen a coworker alive in a 10-foot block of ice. I've eaten dog food live on a radio station to show the employees that were there that I was willing to do whatever I would ask them to do. It would be highly entertaining. I think, the reality is it's all leading to the same, mountaintop for all of us. We've all accomplished a lot more in our lives because we have an understanding of what it takes to reach that next level. That's the greatest gift that Coach McRae ever gave to anybody. And I'll say the whole coaching staff, but this is specifically a Mike thing, because there were times where it was hard to be a pitcher with Coach McRae, where he would run us to death, or he would be hard on his expectation of us, or whatever.
Yeah, I remember Joel talking about that too. Remember after we just got thumped by Canisius back to back, and I think our families are waiting for us in the stands and friends, and we're running suicides down the right field line. I remember thinking, like, what the hell did I just sign up for? And but you're right. It's two things. It's life's a journey, right? We can all tell our kids, and people listening that got young kids. It's you influence their lives at such an early age. I mentioned I'm involved with the Y. I'm also involved with other kids groups because I'm a big believer. It's easier to help a child than to try to fix an adult that's hurting. And so to help that child, getting them involved in anything, it doesn't matter what it is, getting them involved, whether it's, my oldest does dance, which is a bit of a racket at times, but, she loves it and she's thriving in it. And she's done stuff by the time she was 7 years old that would terrified me as a 12-year-old to stand in front of judges in a full auditorium by yourself to dance and do a routine. And, but just getting involved in anything, and because that's where you're going to get those mentors, like the coaching staff and McRae, like he really has. He's been such a influence in my life, right? Where coming back to saying, just let it go. When I needed that push more than anything, and that drive, don't quit. Right. And then, the best is yet to come. And, I'm a big believer that, hey, if you I feel like, the success probably a lot of entrepreneurs have had from our Brock team, including you and I, is because you didn't quit. And that next door, you never know that next door it's going to open as long as you keep going forward, because the phone's not going to ring. You got to go make it ring.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a simple statement. We'll end on it, but you never know what you're capable of or what that next level looks like unless you can see it. And I think this program, and specifically Coach McRae, I think it took a collective group of people and let them see what their own potential was. And, just the amount of work, the amount of professional application you need to reach that next level. And we owe a huge debt of gratitude towards just the visibility in our own lives of what it takes to unlock your potential.
Well said, man. Well said.
And I can personalize this a little bit. I went on and had better years after Brock as a pitcher because I knew what I was capable of. It started to show that when I was playing junior and had a really good year at Brock. There's no doubt about it. But it was easy for me because I was pitching inspired, essentially, as a memorial to my brother and a few other, kind of things that I was blessed with naturally. They didn't occur. But without that work, without that attention to detail, without those repetition, without the belief, that is the one thing that I remember of Coach Kemp coming to me and saying, Mike, you pitched really well again. It was a game against Niagara. He said, you pitched really well today. And he said, just don't change, just keep doing it. The belief allows people, and similar to, if you think of Jeff Lounsbury's comment to you, where it's like, we believe in you, you've got to take that next 5 to 10% step yourself. When you have people that believe in you in life, it makes all the difference in the world for what comes after, no matter what circumstance you're facing. And I'll just use a simple professional story to cap that off. I had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman named Richard Newcomb, who is the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission in Los Angeles, which is the largest private homeless shelter in California. And they do an Over the Edge fundraiser there that does 1.8 million, which is the most in the history of Over the Edge.
Awesome.
And, Richard just was such an inspiring guy to talk to about how he believed that the standard of excellence comes from, applying to your own life and to your own professional situation, just a want to kind of make sure that you're always innovating, you're always pushing yourself, you're always pushing those around you. And as a result, they have such extraordinary culture. They've doubled the size of the organization in 4 years in the teeth of the pandemic. They've doubled the size of their organization and spend level, despite donation levels dropping heavily in the US and in Canada. So, people are capable of so much if they just have the courage and the belief. And I think that, Rob, you always made your teammates believe when you're out there, and you're making a lot of people believe today. So
I appreciate it. It's very kind. And I know you're doing the same, man. And you're right. It just sometimes like that story, that's an amazing story, is that people just need that someone to lead that way for them, right? Like help them, guide them. And especially when you're passionate about it yourself, to have others that want to follow your passion, and especially when they know you're coming from a good spot and everybody can see the results. I think that's key. I've been big on that. I'm a big vision board guy. Like, there's my girls, everybody. It's important to me. and striving for vision. And what's important to me, because I'd say this too, the other thing that you got to do to me is always kind of like every once in a while you got to stop and smell the roses, because it's like, here we are, we're 50 years old and we're talking about ball that doesn't seem that long ago. It was more than half a lifetime ago for all of us. And that stopping, one of my notes there is have more fun, right? Because sometimes you can get caught, as you and I both know, that when you're a driver, it's just trying to get better. And it's not, to me, it was never about making more money. It was just being better, right? It's a byproduct of all the other things you do, kind of like practice, right? It's repetitive. As Kemper told you, don't change, just keep going. So you keep doing all those things. The second you stop, right, that's all of a sudden where that you get, that cord breaks, because you're not continuously moving up keep moving up that mountaintop, is the example used earlier. So right on.
Amazing. Rob Guts Green. I won't tell your wife that I nicknamed you that, but thank you so much for your time today. And we'll see you soon, my friend. Thank you so much for this.
I appreciate you doing this, and I love that you got this going. It's exciting to see everybody, and thanks for all you do for Brock Back, man. And it's a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you. You good?
Thanks.
Thanks, brother.
Well, the smell